Our next speaker is Dr. Yves Marignac. He is from 1996. He was member of the World Information Service and Energy Wise Paris. From 2003 to 2019, he was director. Now he is head of the NEGA Watt Institute, and he is also a member of INRAG, and he is going to give us an update on and this was also his contribution to the risk report on the situation of lifetime extensions in France. Please, Yves, you have the floor.
Okay, sorry. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to give you an update on the French situation, which will confirm some of the things Gabriel has just said. And I just want to start maybe by reminding everyone of the size of the nuclear program in France. We still have 56 operating reactors. It's a very standardized nuclear fleet, which has some importance in the way France is dealing with this life extension program through generic reviews for each of these standards rather than individual decisions, although these individual decisions also take place, of course. It's worth also to keep in mind that when we are talking about life extension in France, we are not only talking about reactors, which will be the topic of my presentation, but also about the life extension of the multiple nuclear plants, like fuel facilities that support this program. But we have still 56 reactors operating, and there are, like in any country, aging. We are facing an increasing aging situation with an average of almost 36 years of operation of reactors since their first connection to the grid. It is different from one standard of the fleet to another, but the 900 megawatt, which are the older ones, come close to 40 years of operation on average, which was their initial design lifetime. And we are therefore obviously in the beginning of a potentially massive life extension program. This life extension has been discussed for many years. EDF made the decision to prioritize life extension of the existing reactors to their replacement by new EPR reactors when they reach 40 as early as 2008, which was only 1 year after they started the building of the EPR in Flamanville. And so the process of discussing this life extension started back in 2012, 2013. And ASN brought very ambitious objectives at that time, saying in substance that the life extension should only be accepted through bringing the existing reactors as close as possible to the safety requirements of EPR reactors, which meant reinforcing or reducing the risk of a core melt, reducing and making almost impossible the scenario of large release of radioactivity in case of a core melt, and also reducing the risk of severe accident on the spent fuel pools to something called extremely improbable, like for some of the terms that Gabriel pointed to. As close as possible, extremely improbable are very strong wordings, but which don't come with specific definitions, which allows for any kind of course of interpretation. there was no formal dedicated mandatory public consultation, only informal ones, which, as Gabriel said, don't have the same impact at all. And in particular, there was, although the safety objectives were supposed to be reinforced, there was no change in the reactors' initial license decrees, which remain those of the year 70. Of the 70s and 80s, and are very limited compared to what is at stake now. I spoke about a potential massive life extension program. We are actually in the midst of a decided life extension program on a very large scale. This is what the projection of the official French energy plan looks like when you put it down to the operation of existing reactors. So we have this objective of reducing the share of nuclear power from roughly 75% today to 50% by 2035. It was initially by 2025, but it's been postponed already. When you look at the numbers, we have only 2 reactors that have shut down, Fessenheim 1 and 2. All the other ones need to go through a life extension up to the 5th periodic safety review, and probably some of them will need to pass also the 5th periodic safety review to go for operation over 50 years, even before 2035. And possibly, if we follow the trajectory, some of them will need to operate for a longer period than 60 years in the end. Of course, this life extension has been discussed through the usual issues of aging, management, of reinforcement, and conformity. When it comes to aging issues, many, like the usual issues have been identified and discussed, like those which concern structures, systems, and components. That includes, of course, the reactor vessels. Their initial assessment was particularly regarding irradiation-induced embrittlement, designed for 40 years, but there was extensive assessment effort, very much discussed, but which led EDF, IRSN, and ASN to the conclusion that the vessels could still operate for at least 10 more years. There was also some discussion about the containment of the reactor buildings, and there the main issue is the air tightness criteria, which is actually met through reinforcing the containment or the tightness by putting additional coating, which of course doesn't reinforce the robustness of the building itself. And altogether on those issues, there's been a real lack of quantification of the remaining margins through all these changes. There were obviously strong discussions on reinforcement issues. I just want to point to 2 of the main discussions. One is the one about the so-called core catcher of the reactors. Core catcher was a concept introduced for the EPR, which is aiming at keeping the melted core in case of a severe accident in a specific place where it could cool down without scrapping the concrete slab. This was initially meant to be developed on the existing reactors as part of the life extension, but it was actually not possible to do so because of I mean, because of the existing design and the limitations it brings. What was decided was to try to create a device that would not stop but slow down the core, the melted core, so that it could not go all over through the concrete slab, which of course depends on the speed of interaction between the concrete and the corium. And there is a pending issue regarding the behavior of the concrete on different reactors, depending on the on whether it's a silica concrete or not. But altogether, this was a kind of step down compared to the initial objective of implementing a so-called core catcher on each reactor. And there was a huge step down also regarding the spent fuel pools, where any idea of reinforcing the concrete structure of the spent fuel pools buildings, and especially the roof, which is not made of concrete but just a metallic structure, was just given up. And the objective is simply to provide more redundancy and reliability of water support, so that the risk of a loss of water could be practically eliminated, which again is a term that is that seems strong but is not well defined enough to bring real confidence. A large part of the discussion was actually on life extension, aging management, and reinforcement, was actually articulated with the concern for reinforcing the reactors after Fukushima, which in France went around this new and innovative concept of a so-called hardened safety core, which relates to new or reinforced structures, systems, and components that would allow for guaranteeing that power and water and heat sink could be provided to the reactor in any situation, thanks to very robust new equipments like kind of ultimate diesel source, or an ultimate water supply. This was of course very important to kind of guarantee that although the reactors were aging, although some of the components were not strong enough in the face of new requirements, this hardened core could bring all the ultimate safety that was needed. Nevertheless, that didn't prevent the discussion to also focus on conformity or non-conformity issues. We had over the past 5 years or so an increasing and very worrying number of generic incidents relating to some non-conformity of equipments, and notably some of them related to the seismic robustness of either power supply and or water supply or heat sink on many reactors. You can see some of these main incidents on the map, and you can see that many reactors were actually for some years in a situation where either the maximum design-based seism or a seism higher than the design base would actually make power and or water supply fail, which precisely means that a large number of reactors were at risk of finding themselves in a kind of Fukushima situation. That led to ASN, IRSN to acknowledge that the periodic safety review was not only about reinforcing the safety requirement, but maybe even more so to make sure that at least existing requirements are met, and therefore discuss this conformity of existing plant. And ASN brought a lot of new requirements for reinforcing the conformity checks as part of the periodic safety reviews. We still have another kind of non-conformity that is kind of new, and that is for the time being very not satisfyingly dealt with in the French system, which is the kind of new situation of frauds. This is illustrated, for instance, by this graph, which shows the extent of frauds found at Creusot-Forges. You can see here that over 1,000 deviations were found on the pieces of heavy components that are still in operation in the 900 megawatt reactors. And the worrying thing is that there was not, as far as we know, any review. Well, there was a review of these cases and their importance for safety, but this was not developed as part of the life extension assessment. In other words, the implications of these deviations is questioned when it comes to thinking of aging of components, or when it comes to the robustness of those components to extreme situations like those considered in post-Fukushima requirements. We propose at some point that some stress tests are developed to deal with the risk of non-detected or non-detectable non-conformities due to fraud. This we try to push that discussion, but this, of course, has not been picked up by ASN so far. My final comment will be about the another issue which we are facing, which is the continuous delay of implementation. What we see is that ASN is continuously kind of adapting the schedule for implementing its prescriptions to the reality of what EDF could deliver. We had like almost 2 years delay in the implementation of the long-awaited ultimate diesel generators. We have seen ASN accepting to postpone some of the reinforcement work that is due as part of this fourth periodic safety assessment for 900 megawatt reactors, postponing it by 5 years, which means that the reinforcement that were expected as a condition for allowing operation after 40 years will only happen 5 years later. And ASN namely justified it by the need to realistically adjust to EDF's capacity to implement, which we find is contrary to the spirit, at least, of the nuclear regulations, which call for ASN to guarantee that at any time the operators have the technical and financial capacity to meet requirements. So this is just reversed. And also back in 2012, when ASN made its conclusions after the French stress tests after Fukushima, ASN stated that the post-Fukushima reinforcements, which means mostly the implementation of the hardened core, should be implemented as soon as possible to allow for continued operation. And ASN spoke of 10 years at that time. We recently reviewed the current status of post-Fukushima prescriptions, which have been, for a large part of them, embedded in periodic safety reviews and therefore in life extension programs. What we found is that the final completion of the promised reinforcements, post-Fukushima reinforcements, will not be met earlier than 2035 or 2040, which means at least 25 years after the accident. Which brings me to some concluding remarks. First, that EDF and the French government have really committed to a massive life extension program for the 56 reactors that remain in operation. They did so without or with very limited public consultation, only informal processes, also based on incomplete and unsubstantive information. Although ASN has set very ambitious objectives, their concrete translation into regulatory requirements and prescriptions remained remains often limited, and the resulting level of safety remains unclear. The introduction of this hardened safety core concept has been key to try to reconcile these high objectives with the intractable loss of margins due to obsolescence and aging. However, EDF's capacity to guarantee the required level of conformity is increasingly challenged, and the overall implementation schedule is subject to delays, mostly due to realistic adjustments by ASN to EDF's decreasing capacity to cope with this massive implementation. Thank you very much.